On a frozen morning in the Colorado Rockies, a quiet mountain town woke to sirens slicing through snowfall. Alpine Bank was supposed to represent stability, community, and trust. Instead, it became the center of a brazen robbery that unfolded with snowmobiles roaring across white silence. Was this a desperate act of survival, or a calculated strike against a financial fortress believed to be untouchable? Beneath the postcard beauty of ski lifts and timber lodges, investigators uncovered a story that challenged assumptions about security, loyalty, and power. In a place built on image and isolation, someone dared to test the system. The genesis of Alpine Bank. Could a solitary independent bank wage a financial war against massive national conglomerates from a sleepy rural town in the Colorado mountains? In 1973, setting up shop in Carbondale to compete against aggressively expanding corporate giants seemed fundamentally illogical. The banking landscape was rapidly shifting toward immense consolidation, where local relationships were being quickly replaced by distant, centralized bureaucracies making decisions thousands of miles away from the people they actually impacted. Yet, this high-altitude gamble was not the impulsive dream of an amateur, but the calculated strike of an industry veteran who fundamentally understood the unique economic ecosystem of mountain communities. The architect of this audacious plan was J. Robert Bob Young, a 1961 graduate of Wichita State University. Young possessed a resume heavily armored for the exact battle he was entering. He spent his early career cutting his teeth at the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, gaining an intense, inside look at why financial institutions succeed or spectacularly fail. By 1965, he moved to Denver, and shortly after, he stepped into the role of Executive Vice President at First Bank of Colorado. It was here, while directly supervising the opening of First Bank of Vail in 1968, that Young recognized a massive vulnerability in the corporate banking model. He saw firsthand the highly specialized, deeply volatile economic demands of seasonal resort towns, a reality that distant corporate algorithms simply could not comprehend. Armed with this specialized knowledge, Young launched Roaring Fork Bank, the institution that would eventually become the powerhouse known today as Alpine Bank. He envisioned an entity fiercely independent from the national behemoths, a fortress of local capital dedicated to making lending decisions based on actual human interaction rather than just spreadsheet metrics. This localized strategy was not merely a feel-good community gesture, but a ruthless operational advantage. By maintaining absolute local control, the bank could pivot and serve the unique seasonal rhythms of the ski industry and the local workforce in ways rigid national competitors could not replicate. The structural genius of this independence was permanently locked into place in 1983 with the implementation of an employee stock ownership plan. Young transformed his workforce into literal stakeholders, fundamentally aligning the success of the employees with the survival of the institution. He built the corporate culture around the concept of caring, positioning this trait not as a soft human resources buzzword, but as the supreme operational imperative dictating every financial transaction and customer interaction. Caring became the ultimate competitive edge against faceless national conglomerates. What began as a defiant stand in a quiet valley laid the absolute bedrock for a financial titan. That solitary independent venture forged in Carbondale defied the relentless tide of corporate banking consolidation to systematically conquer the Colorado Rockies. It expanded into an unstoppable financial juggernaut, ultimately transforming into a staggering $6.8 billion empire commanding 39 strategic locations across the beautiful centennial state of Colorado. The Millennium Mountain Resort expansion. Fast forward to the dawn of the new millennium. The regional ski industry was suddenly undergoing a massive seismic shift, and Copper Mountain was standing right at the absolute epicenter of this dramatic commercial explosion. The entire mountain was actively shedding its old, outdated identity as a rugged, heavily fragmented collection of basic base area facilities. It was rapidly mutating into a highly engineered, totally cohesive village environment specifically designed to keep every single person directly on the property. Alpine Bank recognized this massive transformation and immediately sensed an undeniable opportunity to completely capture an entirely new economic ecosystem before their competitors even noticed it. They did not just want to open a small, quaint mountain branch. They intended to fully embed themselves into the very financial circulatory system of the entire booming resort property. In 2001, the ambitious bank successfully executed a highly calculated dual strike, aggressively launching new operations absolutely simultaneously in both Copper Mountain and the growing city of Montrose. This was a brilliant, highly sophisticated geographical and economic play. They decisively planted a flag directly inside the high-altitude recreational hub while simultaneously anchoring themselves deep in the vital regional trade center that heavily supported the surrounding mountain valleys. By successfully positioning a physical, permanent branch directly at the immediate base of the busy Copper Mountain ski lifts, Alpine Bank completely eliminated massive logistical hurdles for many thousands of desperate people. The commercialized resort had effectively created a massive captive audience that was entirely dependent on nearby, immediate infrastructure. You had a massive local workforce, exhausted people living in cramped resort employee housing or making the frustrating daily trek from nearby Frisco, who previously had to aggressively waste their precious hours commuting down the highway just to handle basic, necessary financial transactions. Placing a physical bank directly in their daily path completely changed the operational reality of the entire local economy. Simultaneously, the newly cohesive village was heavily flooded with a massive, constant influx of wealthy, seasonal winter tourists. These were vulnerable vacationers arriving far away from their home, completely separated from their usual safe financial safety nets, yet heavily demanding immediate access to liquid cash and transactional services right there at the snowy base of the busy mountain. Alpine Bank confidently stepped right into that massive void, easily capturing the heavy cash flow of thousands of affluent visitors before they ever actually left the designated resort boundary lines. But establishing a permanent physical foothold in a harsh, volatile winter environment constantly requires serious, undeniable operational muscle and stability. Alpine Bank surprisingly arrived heavily fortified by pioneering complex technological advancements that most competing regional banks simply did not possess. 2 years prior, back in 1999, the independent institution had successfully secured a highly coveted, complex Web Trust certification. This was definitely not some minor administrative badge. It was an absolutely massive, undeniable technological flex for a local organization. This crucial certification permanently established the elite, impenetrable security infrastructure absolutely necessary to safely process the staggering, massive daily volume of complex out-of-town transactions constantly pouring through the busy resort every single winter day. They successfully leveraged this incredibly secure high-tech framework to completely dominate the market, proving that local operations could easily handle massive digital demands. The strategic passage point takeover. In traditional commercial real estate development, a premium location usually dictates massive financial success or total structural collapse. In the highly volatile, unpredictable world of modern alpine resort banking, securing the absolute perfect physical footprint is quite literally the only realistic mechanism for institutional survival. You have to carefully consider the absolutely terrifying sheer logistical nightmare of trying to efficiently position a full-service retail banking branch in an environment where nearly every single potential customer is actively sliding down a freezing mountain on heavy fiberglass skis. The executives at Alpine Bank understood this geographical puzzle perfectly, executing a completely brilliant and aggressive strategic takeover of 910 Copper Road, Unit 125. This was definitely not just some random commercial lease buried in the back of a snowy parking lot. They decisively planted their heavy corporate flag directly on the ground floor of the massive Passage Point building, positioning themselves as the undeniable commercial anchor right in the beating heart of Center Village. The geographical math of this specific location is absolutely staggering when you analyze the daily human traffic patterns. The front doors of this financial fortress sat less than 250 yards from the primary ski lifts. Every single morning, thousands of eager tourists and exhausted local employees were physically forced to navigate directly past the bank simply to access the snowy slopes or return to their expensive lodging. The true architectural genius of this strategic placement was the highly calculated concept of boots-off accessibility. Resort planners purposely designed these ground-floor retail units so that freezing, exhausted skiers could seamlessly transition straight from the harsh, icy slopes directly into a warm, highly functional retail and service environment without ever having to step outside into the brutal winter elements. For Alpine Bank, this specific design feature instantly unlocked a completely captive, highly lucrative audience consisting of wealthy vacationing families, busy local real estate professionals, and thousands of dedicated resort employees who desperately needed immediate financial services. By heavily anchoring themselves at this highly visible, completely unavoidable address, Alpine Bank officially became a permanent, immovable fixture on the Summit County financial map. They strategically wedged their physical operations directly alongside other massive corporate heavyweights like Starbucks, Copper Mountain Mercantile, and McCoy's Mountain Market. This aggressive clustering tactic forged an incredibly dense, totally inescapable retail ecosystem right at the base of the mountain. If a tourist needed a morning coffee, expensive ski gear, or basic groceries, they were practically tripping over the entrance to the bank. A stable, reputable storefront tenant like Alpine Bank provided the essential commercial gravity necessary to maintain soaring occupancy rates throughout the entire Center Village retail corridor. They transformed a challenging, heavily seasonal ski resort lobby into a relentlessly efficient, highly profitable transactional hub, successfully capturing massive daily capital flows simply by existing in the absolute perfect, heavily trafficked winter intersection, firmly establishing an undeniable local dominance that absolutely crushed any potential regional banking competition. The Summit County Regional Web. You might look at a single bank branch sitting at the base of a snowy mountain and assume it operates as a completely isolated, lone wolf outpost, simply surviving the elements. But Alpine Bank at Copper Mountain was absolutely never meant to stand alone. It was a highly calculated, deeply embedded node operating within a massive, heavily fortified regional web designed to completely blanket Summit County. To truly understand the scale of their operational dominance, you must closely examine the entire heavily engineered map. The executives were systematically constructing an interlocking grid of financial fortresses. They initially struck south, planting their first major flag in Breckenridge in the year 1999 to secure the massive, highly lucrative year-round residential and tourist hub. Exactly 2 short years later, in 2001, they simultaneously launched their highly specialized Copper Mountain branch to intercept the heavy, localized resort traffic. But a network requires rigid administrative anchors to survive the brutal off-seasons. So, they aggressively filled the geographical gaps, launching the pivotal Frisco branch right on the Central Transit Corridor in 2007, effectively linking the entire system together alongside their major retail service center established right next door over in Dillon. Operating a bank in a high-altitude ski resort introduces an incredibly terrifying level of pure economic volatility. During the absolute peak winter months, the sheer volume of transient capital flooding the region is completely staggering, followed instantly by dead, totally silent springs and falls where the local tourist economy simply packs up and evaporates entirely. Alpine Bank essentially built a massive, brilliant financial shock absorber to manage this wild seasonal whiplash. The Breckenridge and Copper Mountain branches functioned as the frontline surge protectors, aggressively absorbing the brutal, relentless wave of massive, chaotic winter visitor transactions pouring in daily. While those high-altitude locations handled the extreme seasonal chaos, the lower-elevation Frisco and Dillon locations quietly executed the heavy, year-round administrative anchoring. They provided absolute stability, serving the permanent, local, working-class residents and regional business owners who desperately needed a reliable financial partner when the ski lifts finally stopped spinning. If a resort worker opened a checking account at Copper Mountain during the busy winter, they received the exact same seamless, uninterrupted service down in Frisco during the quiet, muddy spring melting months. This flawless regional synergy completely neutralized the dangerous seasonal volatility that historically crushes so many other vulnerable mountain businesses. By perfectly balancing the high-energy tourist surges against rock-solid, year-round local administration, the institution successfully achieved something otherwise considered practically impossible in such a violently fluctuating mountain economy. This precise, calculated structural balance directly secured their absolute, untouchable, 5-star rating from the rigorous analysts at Bauer Financial, a highly coveted mark of supreme institutional stability they proudly maintained for many consecutive years. They did not just survive the brutal mountain seasons. They scientifically engineered a cohesive, unstoppable regional network that thrived absolutely on them. The ski town operational rhythm. Why would a major financial institution actively choose to lock its front doors and completely shut down its primary public lobby after operating for only 4 brief hours a day? In a standard metropolitan banking environment, completely restricting public access to a microscopic window between 8 in the morning and noon, Monday through Friday, would be an absolute recipe for catastrophic corporate failure. People expect their banks to be open all day. But up at Copper Mountain, this extremely compressed schedule was not some lazy administrative oversight or a sign of institutional weakness. It was a completely intentional, hyper-specialized operational tactic, specifically engineered to perfectly match the highly unusual biological and economic rhythm of a thriving, high-altitude ski town. The bank executives understood perfectly that the local workforce, the stressed property managers, and the busy resort business owners operate on an entirely different clock than the rest of the standard corporate world. They aggressively targeted that highly specific, incredibly narrow pre-lift and mid-morning administrative window. In a high-altitude resort town, if a busy commercial business owner or a local residential tenant is actually going to handle their serious financial errands, they are absolutely going to execute those necessary tasks before the mountain ski lifts start turning at full capacity, and the entire village completely floods with chaotic, unmanageable tourist traffic. By noon, the daily economic die is firmly cast, the snowy slopes are packed, and the entire local workforce is completely consumed by the massive operational demands of running the resort. Alpine Bank simply aligned their physical availability directly with the actual waking reality of their primary local demographic. Yet, if you mistakenly judge the sheer financial power of this specific mountain branch entirely by its incredibly short public lobby hours, you would be wildly underestimating the massive economic force actually operating directly behind those locked doors. While the physical teller windows might have closed down exactly at midday, the actual financial machinery of the branch was aggressively processing massive, incredibly complex regional transactions all day long. This was absolutely not just some simple rural depository for winter tip money. The highly trained local staff was constantly securing massive commercial real estate loans, specifically leveraging their deep, nuanced understanding of inflated mountain property values to quietly fund massive resort area developments. They were actively writing highly specialized, high-altitude residential mortgages, expertly navigating the highly complex financial realities of primary mountain residences and lucrative seasonal vacation rentals. Furthermore, this supposedly small, 4-hour-a-day branch served as a direct, incredibly powerful conduit to the formidable Alpine Bank Wealth Management Division. This specific institutional division was an absolute financial juggernaut that successfully managed a truly staggering $1.27 billion in total assets by mid-2024. The true underlying secret weapon, actively driving this massive, relentless volume of high-level financial services, was the undeniable power of their local-to-local operational standard. The professionals sitting behind those wooden branch desks were definitely not distant corporate transfers. They were actual dedicated community neighbors who intimately understood the crushing economic pressures and the unique logistical challenges of living full-time in a harsh, heavily inflated, high-cost mountain environment. This shared regional reality fostered deep trust, the global mountain ATM hack. Tourists stuck in an expensive, isolated ski resort constantly need liquid cash. At 2 in the morning, long after the crowded bars finally close their doors, or at 7 in the morning right before the expensive ticket windows open for the day, people desperately require immediate access to their funds. If your local financial institution cannot efficiently deliver that physical currency exactly when they demand it, some other predatory corporate entity absolutely will step in and take that highly profitable transaction. Providing continuous, uninterrupted access to cash for a massive, constantly rotating transient visitor population is arguably the most critical operational challenge for any mountain-based bank. Alpine Bank aggressively solved this massive logistical headache by strategically deploying a heavily fortified, heavily utilized automated teller machine directly in the freezing center of the bustling resort village. This solitary machine operated completely flawlessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, standing as a relentless, silent financial sentinel right in the middle of the frantic Alpine chaos. But simply dropping a cash dispenser in the snow is not a brilliant strategy. The actual, undeniable strategic masterstroke was their brilliant, highly calculated integration into the massive all-point ATM network. This specific global system is not some minor banking cooperative. It is the absolute largest surcharge-free ATM network in the entire world, successfully commanding a staggering footprint of over 55,000 active locations nationwide. By aggressively linking their solitary mountain machine to this massive grid, Alpine Bank essentially hacked the entire regional financial system. When exhausted out-of-town visitors from New York or California walked up to that snowy machine in Center Village, they fully expected to be financially punished with massive, predatory out-of-network withdrawal fees. Instead, because their distant home banks were also plugged into the vast all-point system, these tourists suddenly withdrew their vacation cash completely fee-free. This single, brilliant technological integration instantly transformed a tiny, isolated mountain branch into a highly critical, heavily utilized node of massive global financial infrastructure. They completely bypassed the traditional, highly restrictive geographical limitations of standard regional community banking. In a heavily commercialized village where late-night dining tabs and early morning ski rentals constantly demand immediate liquid funds, providing this constant, completely free availability became a massive, highly visible value add for the entire resort package. Alpine Bank quietly turned a standard mechanical convenience into a lethal, highly effective tool for capturing the intense loyalty of thousands of transient visitors who never even stepped foot inside their actual lobby. This silent strategy perfectly proved how a small local bank could seamlessly serve global tourists without ever speaking a single word to them. The Alpine Community Social Strategy. To actually convince a transient, deeply cynical ski town that a massive corporate financial institution genuinely cares about their daily survival, you physically get down in the trenches and throw them a massive local party. Bob Young built his entire banking empire on the fundamental philosophy of caring. But in a harsh mountain environment, corporate words are completely meaningless. The executives at Alpine Bank thoroughly understood they had to vigorously prove this concept through aggressive, boots-on-the-ground community building, rather than running just another shiny corporate marketing campaign. They initiated the annual Shred Day, typically held right in the middle of June over at the Dillon Service Center. On the surface, bringing in massive industrial shredders so residents and local business owners can safely destroy sensitive documents seems like a mundane administrative chore. But it was actually a brilliant, highly calculated tactical move. By tackling the terrifying threat of identity theft, they flawlessly tied personal financial security directly to local civic duty. Bank employees were literally out in the hot summer sun, physically hauling heavy boxes of paper out of local vehicles, while simultaneously raising critical funding for the Rotary Club of Summit County. Then they aggressively expanded their social footprint by heavily sponsoring the Park After Dark historical series in direct collaboration with the Frisco Historic Park and Museum. This was definitely not your typical stuffy corporate philanthropy. They successfully funded completely free, highly engaging night events that perfectly blended local education with modern entertainment. They hosted massive silent discos in September 2023 and September 2025. By handing out wireless headphones to the crowd, they allowed the entire community to dance wildly together without creating any illegal noise pollution in the highly regulated mountain evening. It was a completely brilliant modernization of the traditional town dance. They did not stop at dancing. They brought in Astromark to lead heavily guided tours of the vast night sky using free, high-powered telescopes. This stargazing initiative directly supported the crucial regional dark sky movement, aggressively fighting local light pollution to permanently preserve the breathtaking visibility of the mountain heavens above. They even brought in the Raptor Education Foundation, featuring massive live owls, to actively educate the dense local population about crucial regional wildlife and complex bird migration patterns happening right over their heads. All of these highly specific community sponsorships brilliantly demonstrated that their regional commitment extended far beyond simple commercial interest. They were actively fighting to preserve the actual cultural heritage and fragile environmental sanctity of the entire Summit County area. This relentless, highly visible civic engagement permanently proved that the founding philosophy of caring was absolutely never just an empty public relations stunt. It was an undeniable, deeply entrenched operational reality that fundamentally cemented their mountain legacy forever. Every single localized decision absolutely showcased extreme institutional loyalty to a vulnerable, constantly shifting population living directly under those high alpine peaks every year. This is absolute fact. The corporate real estate sell-off. In May of 2022, the absolute biggest institutional money suddenly rolled directly into this snowy mountain town. When a massive collection of 19 distinct commercial buildings suddenly goes straight onto the corporate chopping block, the entire local economy completely holds its breath, waiting to see exactly who survives the ruthless financial transition. In these massive, high-stakes commercial real estate transactions, the ultimate survivor is absolutely always the strongest foundational anchor. JLL Capital Markets officially announced the breathtaking, monumental sale of the entire village at Copper Mountain, a staggering transaction involving exactly 101,506 square feet of highly coveted premium retail and office space. They aggressively marketed this sprawling, totally cohesive portfolio of properties on behalf of a major subsidiary and successfully transferred massive ownership directly to the powerful Big V Property Group. What makes this specific corporate transaction so absolutely staggering is the undeniable, rock-solid stability hidden right inside the official paperwork. At the exact moment of this massive institutional sale, that expansive mountain portfolio boasted an absolutely mind-blowing 97% total occupancy rate. In the notoriously ruthless, incredibly volatile world of high-altitude boutique retail, where heavily seasonal local restaurants and small ski shops constantly go bankrupt and completely vanish every single spring, maintaining that level of total commercial occupancy is practically a financial miracle. Institutional investors deploying hundreds of millions of dollars absolutely hate seasonal volatility. They desperately demand undeniable, bulletproof stability before they ever write a massive check. This is exactly where the solitary, independent local financial institution became the absolute undeniable kingmaker of the entire massive resort real estate deal. Deep inside the dense, heavily scrutinized legal and financial transaction materials, Alpine Bank was prominently and explicitly heralded as the prime, totally stable storefront tenant. They were officially classified as the absolute ultimate credit tenant security, directly anchoring the entire commercial ecosystem. While other smaller seasonal businesses desperately struggled to merely survive the quiet, brutal off-seasons, the bank sat right there on the busy ground floor, aggressively processing millions of dollars and providing the exact heavy financial gravity that massive outside investors strictly demanded. They were definitely not just another simple, easily replaceable tenant renting a small, freezing corner of the snowy village. That specific branch fundamentally acted as the heavy, unbreakable commercial superglue, quietly holding the entire base area of the massive resort completely together. Their long-term, highly predictable, utterly reliable presence, directly alongside a few other massive corporate heavyweights, officially legitimized the entire massive valuation of the surrounding neighborhood. When those powerful outside investors looked closely at the high-altitude property, they did not just see empty ski shops or seasonal hamburger stands. They saw a highly fortified, perfectly engineered financial fortress operated by a trusted local institution that absolutely guaranteed massive, uninterrupted rental revenue year after year, regardless of the harsh winter snowfall. They provided the ultimate peace of mind that magically transformed a deeply risky, unpredictable seasonal ski resort property into a wildly lucrative, perfectly safe corporate asset, making the historic sale completely possible. This incredible display of raw economic power permanently cemented their legendary status as the undisputed heavyweights of the entire regional banking and commercial real estate market forever. The digital mountain banking retreat. And then, after 23 years of total, undisputed physical dominance, right at the base of the snowy mountain, they simply locked the heavy front doors forever. On July 8, 2024, the highly lucrative Copper Mountain branch, officially identified deep within complex corporate regulatory records as Tract 000-3.02, permanently ceased all physical operations. Walking away from an absolute commercial goldmine in a densely populated resort village seems completely counterintuitive to basic business logic. But they did not surrender the highly lucrative local territory to regional banking competitors. The fundamental rules of the entire financial game had simply moved upward into the digital cloud. The ultimate death of the specialized physical lobby was entirely necessitated by a massive, truly unstoppable shift in modern consumer banking behavior. The initial technological seeds of this massive strategic retreat were actually planted way back in 2013 with the ambitious launch of the Alpine mobile application. Over the following decade, this increasingly powerful digital platform systematically rendered traditional, standard, in-person physical transactions completely obsolete. By 2024, the vast majority of personal and complex business banking activities, from routine daily check deposits and massive fund transfers to highly intricate commercial loan applications, could be easily executed directly through personal mobile smartphones, maintaining an increasingly expensive physical storefront operating on restricted hours in a high-rent, highly volatile resort village simply could not be financially justified when directly compared to the ruthless operational efficiency of a centralized digital and regional hub model. This monumental physical closure perfectly coincided with a massive, highly historic leadership shakeup occurring deep within the corporate boardroom. In April of 2024, a totally new generation of highly aggressive financial commanders completely seized control of the strategic corporate wheel. 4 legendary, longtime inside directors officially stepped down from their incredibly powerful executive posts. They deliberately cleared the vital organizational path for ambitious new leaders, specifically Jay Rickstrew and Andrew Caro, who were specifically tasked with fiercely navigating the massive upcoming financial expansion onto the densely populated Front Range, while actively optimizing their crucial legacy footprint high up in the rugged mountains. Assuming that permanently closing a major flagship mountain branch automatically signals deep internal financial distress is a fundamental miscalculation, and the internal corporate ledgers mathematically proved the exact opposite reality. This was a brilliant, highly calculated, tactical digital retreat, executed strictly from a rare position of absolute, terrifying financial strength. The official third quarter financial results reported for 2024 revealed an absolute economic juggernaut, aggressively crushing the notoriously volatile regional interest rate environment. Despite completely shutting down the Copper Mountain physical location, the total financial assets of the institution violently surged to a staggering $6.58 billion. Their massive, highly protected corporate deposit base actively gained an additional $100 million during that exact same period of strategic regional consolidation. They aggressively consolidated their massive regional power simply because they had successfully conquered the new digital frontier without ever losing any critical local momentum. This massive technological shift completely eliminated the daily necessity for a freezing physical building standing silently in the deep winter snow, the post-closure safety net. Usually, shutting down a beloved local business instantly sparks massive, undeniable community outrage. When a major bank suddenly locks its doors forever, the immediate reaction is total panic, assuming the wealthy corporate executives simply took the local money and completely abandoned the struggling town. But this specific transition was totally devoid of local chaos, because the institution had already meticulously constructed an unbreakable financial safety net years in advance. They executed a completely seamless operational funneling, systematically transferring every single stranded Copper Mountain account directly down the canyon to their massive Frisco branch, located at 701 North Summit Boulevard. This specific location was heavily fortified with expansive full-day lobby access and highly efficient drive-through lanes, perfectly designed to immediately absorb the displaced mountain traffic without dropping a single routine transaction. For the massive, heavy-hitting resort developers and extremely wealthy seasonal residents who required highly complex financial maneuvering, the bank quietly and efficiently rerouted all specialized commercial lending and massive wealth management portfolios directly to their massive regional hubs situated in Breckenridge and Dillon. Simultaneously, the incredibly robust, highly advanced mobile and secure internet banking platforms effortlessly absorbed the entire daily electronic load without failing. This guaranteed absolute digital continuity, ensuring that busy locals and exhausted resort workers could instantly access their critical liquid funds from their personal smartphones without ever needing to drive down the icy mountain roads to complete their standard daily banking. However, the corporate executives fundamentally understood that highly efficient digital tools and distant regional branches could never fully replace actual, genuine human connection in a tight-knit, deeply skeptical mountain valley. They desperately needed to definitively prove to the fierce local workforce that they had absolutely not abandoned the snowy resort that originally helped build their massive regional empire. To maintain their crucial status as trusted neighbors, the bank deliberately sustained a highly visible, boots-on-the-ground physical presence right inside the busy village ecosystem. They heavily sponsored and actively participated in the Mayor's Cup golf tournament, held directly on the mountain at the Copper Creek Golf Course. This massive local fundraiser directly supported Building Hope Summit County, an absolutely vital, highly respected organization dedicated to regional social health. By putting their own employees directly on the local golf greens and actively funding crucial community survival programs, they brilliantly signaled to the resort leadership and the struggling seasonal workforce that their fierce institutional loyalty remained completely intact. The physical Passage Point lobby was indeed permanently gone forever, but the heavy financial and social gravity of the bank itself was still deeply and permanently embedded in the literal daily survival of the entire mountain community. The Emperor of Mountain Banking. Every financial empire eventually outlives its founding emperor. On December 11th, 2025, the rugged Colorado mountains lost an absolute financial titan. The sudden death of Bob Young marked a monumental, undeniable shift in the regional banking landscape. This somber event was the ultimate passing of the torch for a legendary institution that had fiercely fought national conglomerates for over 50 consecutive years. When the visionary architect of a massive corporate fortress finally falls, the standard assumption is that the entire carefully constructed structure will quickly crumble under the heavy, selfish weight of greedy corporate successors. But Young had spent half a century meticulously engineering an independent institution specifically designed to easily outlast his own mortality. His personal, undeniable impact on the regional economy was absolutely immense and remains deeply codified into official state history. Long before his eventual passing, his relentless, aggressive business acumen officially secured his highly prestigious, permanent induction into the Colorado Business Hall of Fame way back in 2011. He consistently and aggressively funneled his immense corporate power directly into vital regional education, permanently establishing the incredible Alpine Ascent Center at Colorado Mountain College. He did not simply extract massive wealth from those harsh, freezing mountain valleys. He systematically built the permanent academic infrastructure absolutely necessary to train the exact local workforce that would eventually run his own sprawling network of regional branches. The modern corporate guard, stepping directly into the massive leadership void left by his permanent departure, was completely prepared for the incredibly heavy administrative burden. Under the highly aggressive, tightly focused leadership of current president and vice chairman Glenn Jamaron, the sprawling financial network absolutely refused to retreat from its foundational community roots. Instead of pivoting toward ruthless corporate austerity or cheap operational shortcuts, Jamaron fiercely maintained the original, core operational philosophy. The bank continued to actively rake in massive civic accolades, completely dominating the regional social space by successfully seizing the highly coveted inaugural Lead with Impact Award from the prestigious Denver Metro Chamber Leadership Foundation in the year 2025. They successfully achieved this massive, undeniable social recognition without ever sacrificing a single ounce of their terrifying institutional financial stability. While other vulnerable regional banks desperately struggled against highly volatile mountain economics, Alpine Bank confidently held a completely ironclad Tier 1 leverage ratio of exactly 9.62%. This massive, unshakable capital fortress guarantees they possess the absolute, undeniable financial firepower necessary to permanently continue their heavy philanthropic support of the entire Summit County region. The specific physical lobby located at the snowy base of Copper Mountain might be permanently shuttered forever, but the relentless, deeply embedded community spirit originally forged in 1973 continues to completely dominate the entire Colorado Rockies today, securing an unstoppable, perfectly engineered legacy built by a true banking giant who fundamentally understood that absolute loyalty always generates massive regional survival, outlasting any passing seasonal economic storm or harsh winter weather pattern that dares to threaten them. The ultimate mountain banking experiment. You absolutely cannot ever simply look at the locked doors at Passage Point and call it a total corporate failure. It was absolutely never just a standard retail bank branch quietly pushing paper in the deep winter snow. It was a massive, highly calculated 23-year social and financial experiment that decisively and completely won. When you finally strip away all the heavy corporate jargon, you clearly see a small, fiercely employee-owned institution that successfully infiltrated a harsh, isolated resort ecosystem. They aggressively built an absolute financial fortress right at the busy base area, capturing massive tourist wealth, and then brilliantly orchestrated their own physical disappearance exactly when the global banking market demanded a massive digital shift. Surviving for over 2 full decades in a highly volatile, completely unpredictable seasonal ski economy is a truly monumental achievement for any local business. It is an absolute miracle for an independent financial institution competing directly against massive national banking conglomerates with infinitely deeper corporate pockets. They successfully and aggressively executed a totally seamless digital-first evolution without ever once losing the deep, locally owned soul that originally earned them their completely untouchable 5-star rating from strict industry analysts. The highly strategic transition of massive financial power from a freezing, restricted physical lobby directly into a highly efficient, cloud-based digital interface was absolutely not an abandonment of the vulnerable local community. Instead, it was the absolute ultimate realization of Bob Young and his original, brilliant, founding vision. He fundamentally believed that genuine caring and deep human connection were the absolute strongest operational assets any company could ever possess. By systematically shifting the heavy, incredibly tedious daily transactional burdens directly into the digital cloud, the modern bank actually freed up its dedicated human workforce. These local financial experts could now focus entirely on highly specialized, high-level financial survival strategies for the permanent local community down at the massive, permanent regional hub branches in neighboring valley towns. They definitively proved that genuine corporate loyalty absolutely does not require a physical building operating on highly restricted morning hours. It simply requires an unbreakable, highly responsive financial safety net functioning flawlessly in the silent background of everyday, chaotic mountain life. As this incredible financial institution confidently marches directly into its 6th historic decade of continuous regional operation, its legendary 23-year tenure at the base of that specific ski resort permanently stands as absolute historical proof of concept.